All right, everyone, I think we're going to get started here, if that's all right with you. And as people come in, I'm going to admit them, so you're going to see me kind of clicking here and there. But I will start off by saying that I am Brian Trejak. I'm the Executive Director of the Buffalo Maritime Center. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us on this Saturday morning. It's really awful outside, so I'm glad that you guys are inside with us on this Zoom call. I want to start out by letting you know that the BMC is a nonprofit intergenerational community learning center that seeks to promote traditional hand skills and a craftsman-like attitude while advancing knowledge and appreciation of our Western New York maritime heritage, and that's what hopefully you will be seeing throughout the next few minutes. Now, we decided to show you this process in this format, mostly because of the COVID-19 situation that we all find ourselves in, but because it's one thing to see a bronze pour, but it's really something to get to talk with the foundry folks and these guys about the process that they do, right? So I don't know how many of you have seen a bronze pour before, but you can't really talk to these guys while they're working. So the benefit here is that it's sort of like a DVD commentary where we're going to be going through photos, we're going to be showing you videos, and we're going to have Zach, Henry, and Bill talk about what's happening while that's going on. So I think this is quite an interesting thing. This is being recorded. I hope you guys don't mind about that, but we will pop it out after it all goes through. So a word about the quality of the videos. We did our best to research the most efficient format in which to bring this to you. And a little tip though, if you have any other windows open, any other programs open, the quality of the video and the presentation will drop. So you might want to take a little moment just to close some windows and concentrate on what we're doing here. It's a really appreciative thing. All right, so we are keeping, I think I mentioned this before, but we're keeping you all on mute as of right now because we want to really give you the best presentation. But at the end, we're going to ask you to share some questions via chat, and hopefully maybe we can even turn it over and do some verbal questions as well. So all this is to say it's a new venture for us here at the BMC. We really appreciate your patience as we get through this. So thank you and enjoy the show today. So we're going to be talking about the process in creating a bronze sculpture that will tell the Erie Canal story. And although that's very lofty and ambitious, but our artists and craftsmen that you're going to meet are doing the job extremely well, and we're really thankful that we have them. And they're literally making history and can't thank them enough for it. So with that, we are going to start the show. Okay. So these are the fellas. All right, first I'm just going to double check and see if anybody's in the waiting room. We're good. Everything's good. These, and of course, we are in a COVID-19 situation, so you see they're all wearing appropriate PPE, which is wonderful. So we're going to first start off by Zach. That's what he actually looks like. And we're going to ask these guys to go along, give a brief bio of who you are and why you like working with metal. So Zach, you want to start up?
Hi, everybody. My name is Zachary Pritchard. I went to Buffalo State College and got a bachelor's in sculpture. A lot of my focus there was on foundry. I went and got a master's from University of the Arts in Philly with a focus on sculpture. And I've been teaching for the past 5-6 years sculpture at a few different schools, and usually including a foundry component. I think I like the whole casting process so much because, you know, really any form you can think of, you can sort of translate that into metal pretty easily. So that's why I got into it.
All right, very good. Thank you, Zach. And we'll hear more from Zach throughout the morning. This is Henry.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah.
My name is Henry Schmidt. I've been part of the Foundry group for a couple of years. It's been quite a adventure for us to pull this together. Bill and Zach and myself, and a number of other people. A lot of people have helped along the road as well through either work or through donations. My background is I made a living making art for at least 35 going on 40 years. I'm semi-retired at this point. My last position was art director of product art and sculpture at Fisher Price. And actually, that's where I really got more involved with sculpture when I was at Fisher Price, because everything we did there was so sculptural. My background in my educational background is I have a degree in painting and illustration from Syracuse University. And then I also have a master's degree in art education from Buffalo State College as well. But over the years, I've done a lot of different things, ranging from graphic design, teaching, TV, fine arts. So I found myself over the last couple of years focusing on casting in bronze. Bronze is the Cadillac of medias, along with painting, but bronze is one of the classic mediums that artists have used for a long time. So, and it does bring a certain quality and cachet to your work. So that's my story. Okay.
All right. And I just want to add that he forgot one of the most important things is that I used to work with Henry at Fisher Price as a toy designer back in 2000. So when Henry walked back into the BMC, it was quite a wonderful thing to see an old friend. So thanks, Henry, for being a part of this. All right. Good. And Bill.
Hello. I've been in this for about 30 years. I am the head artist and sculptor for, as an independent sculptor for Stone Art Memorial, and have been working in the granite field for quite a long time, and have done bronze for years. I graduated from Virginia Commonwealth University, and then went in the military and lived in Europe for about 3.5 years, and have pieces all over Western New York and outside of Western New York, both in cemeteries and private homes. And my interest in bronze casting has been something, it actually is from a whole childhood thing of exploration, interest in anthropology, archaeology. And when I'm casting, I get this feeling of going to another place. And that place is civilizations that are like the Vikings. Their civilizations were found by the furnaces they left behind to build their swords, to build the parts of their boats. Or when in World War II, you had furnaces on ships, and they built bronze pieces to refit bronze pieces that had broken under boats. And that's where this takes me to. And so there's an emotional connection every time we pour a bronze. It's not just a technical thing. There's a spirit in it, and that's what I get from it. So thank you.
Yeah, wow, that's very emotional description of why you guys do your work. So thank you all for that. And by the way, that's what I look like. And my background is not in bronze, but like I said, I was a Fisher Price toy designer. I taught English in Brooklyn and in Buffalo for a hot second, and did a little bit of community organizing, and then found my way into the Buffalo Maritime Center to make a surfboard. Fell in love with the place and never left. So I've been here for about 4 years, and I'm really lucky to be a part of this whole thing. So thank you all. All right, let's move on. Oh, I do want to take a moment to thank folks who made the Foundry even possible. We have Dave Poulon donated equipment to the Foundry. Of Al Stocker and the Buffalo Rotary made that connection, and through donations with them too. Tom Lead was really pivotal in getting us going, and then Bill Pichter and the Paul and Helen Ellis Charitable Trust did a lot to outfit this whole place. So thank you all to our sponsors for the Foundry. Okay, we'll move on. So We're talking about Governor DeWitt Clinton's 1825 packet boat. Just to talk a little bit about the project. So this is the sculpture that's going to be going on the Longshed, but it's all inspired by John Montague, our founder, which you'll see a picture of in a little bit, by his dream to build a replica of the boat that opened up the Erie Canal. And that is Governor DeWitt Clinton's 1825 packet boat, and this is an initial drawing of it. It's 73 feet long. It's 12 and a half feet wide. So, and then this is a drawing actually, and Henry Schmidt did this drawing that is going to be the sign that's going to go on the Longshed. So thank you, Henry, for this story that we see of the construction of the packet boat. And then Scott Wood, a wonderful designer, designed this sign for us. So thank you, Scott, for doing that as well. So I want to talk to you about just the sponsors of this project. We have the New York State Council for the Arts is sponsoring this sculpture that's going to go on the Longshed. So thank you immensely to them. We have the Canal Corporation, who's actually sponsoring the entire thing. Erie Canal National Heritage Corridor. We have the Buffalo Waterfront, Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation, and New York State in general. So all of those folks, we really do appreciate this. It wouldn't be possible without you. So this guy, we want to highlight as well. David and his wife, Joan Rogers, really spearheaded this whole thing. If it weren't for, and we're talking about Dave Rogers is on the left. If it weren't for him walking in our shop and talking to these two fellas to the right, Roger Allen, our master boat builder, and John Montague to the far right, our founder of the Buffalo Maritime Center, I'm not sure this would happen. So we owe a debt of gratitude to this gentleman. So thank you, Dave. So you see a packet boat. This is a painting by John Montague, as it would have been back in the day. I believe this is called Buffalo Bound. And you can see how people sit on top of the packet boat. This is another rendering by John Montague of the traveling along the Erie Canal. And this is the team. I'm here on the right. You have Roger Allen in the middle, and then John Montague. I also want to add that we have this gentleman to the left is Greg Dudley. He's our boat builder. He wasn't in this picture, but he is a hard worker, and we're lucky to have him in the shop working on this project as well. So with that being said, we do have, I want to show you the Longshed. We're going to fly through this and then get to the actual pour. But this is the building that's going to be down at Canal Side. And frankly, if you've been down there, you see that made a lot of progress already. There was, we were just in the paper. I think it was either yesterday or this morning in the paper. Hold on one second. I just got to enter some people. Marianne and Matt Meyer. All right. And let me close this down here. So this is the Longshed. This is the interior as of the other day. And we are really thankful for ECHDC and Matt Meyer and HHL Architects who have designed a beautiful building. And Timberbuilt is the company that did the structure and the frame. So when you walk in here, you're just going to feel like you're in a boat shop, in a really fancy one at that. And then Severino is obviously finishing up and outfitting the interior. We expect to be in there in late September, early October. That's been pushed out a bit because of the situation we're in. However, we could always use a little bit more time to plan, so it's really clipping along, okay? And then finally, this is the exterior right now. There's a fence blocking it. But this is a quick mock-up, my Photoshop skills at work here, where you have that sign on the Longshed. And right down here, I don't know if you guys can see it, is going to be the sculpture, the 10-foot long sculpture, bronze sculpture that's going to be outside of, I believe it's the east side of the Longshed. So with that being said, we're going to go to the actual concept. And Henry, what I'll do is, Henry, Bill, and Zach, why don't you guys jump in about the process to get to this, which is the concept that we're going with.
Well, I think we started out because when you guys were all pulling together this project and this dream of building the packet boat and then a place to build it and to highlight the process, to complete that loop of education with the general public is, what the boat was, but very importantly is, how was it put together, which is, was the process that went through the whole area along the Erie Canal and how much industry went into that, the building of the canal and the boats themselves and the commerce that moved along its path. But so Brian came to us and said, what would you guys think about doing a piece of sculpture if we could find some money for you? And we're all over that and said, yeah, that's great. So, the three of us, and initially there was another person, Mary Rose, that worked with us as well. And we just threw a bunch of concepts down onto the table and did some drawings and did some research, talked about directions, and they ranged from, abstract ideas to more traditional ideas of what you're seeing right now. And we kind of did narrow it down to what you're seeing on the presentation now. Some of the elements in the sculpture are historic, and some of the elements are the things that we don't really think about that much. And one of the things was that whole idea of the people who built that, the guys that actually dug the ditches and moved the dirt. And then, the craftsmen that built the boats, the men and boys and women that drove the mules and horses that pulled the cargo across the New York State. And then the public, who was there, who gathered there to commemorate the wedding of the waters, of which you see there DeWitt Clinton pouring the water that was brought from the east to the west to symbolize the wedding of the two waters. And we also included not only that the general public, but also the Native American nations that were here too, which we felt was very important to include them in this as well. And we did do some research with Joe Stallman at the Seneca Nation on this. So this is,
Right.
and it's reminiscent of a kind of a WPA kind of mural frieze. So that's kind of where we came from. Guys, yeah. Bill?
Henry, can you explain to them why you have the natives looking off to the side?
Well,
that's left for interpretation, Bill. We gotta, you gotta leave stuff for the audience.
Yeah, you don't want to give it away too much. It's, it was tricky. It was something that I think we were very sensitive about because
right.
we did want to be inclusive, but we didn't want to be, gratuitous. And it was, it was a kind of like the presence is there, but, they were there, but there's all kinds of underlining situations that they were excluded in many ways. So we try to be subtle about that, but it gives us a little feeling that what I created there was they're like gazing off into the distance in a different direction.
Yeah, I will say that in the long shed, there's going to be the mezzanine where we're going to have an exhibit space where we're going to be partnering up with different organizations, Buffalo Harbor Museum and the actual Seneca Iroquois National Museum. And what we're going to do is try to tell the whole story. I mean, John Montague often says like this isn't a celebration as so much of a commemoration. There were some really great things that happened with the Erie Canal and the opening of that canal, but there were some very real kind of horrible things that happen along the way that we want to tell the full story of that. So we're looking forward to partnering up with these different organizations and saying you should know this entire thing. We can't just whitewash it and say everything was beautiful back then. There were some really great things and there were some things that we should think about as we learn about this history. So with that being said, we're going to move forward and talk about the sculpting process, and then we'll get into the videos. Henry, I'm just going to click through at Bill and Zach, just kind of talk about what's happening as we're going along here.
Well, kind of what's happening here is I took my initial drawing, and we took the initial drawings and blew them up to scale. And they were mounted on boards in order for us to do sculpture. And it's a way of having a pattern to work from. It's traditional. A lot of murals and everything, the drawings were done and then scaled up and applied to the walls. In this particular case, it gave us a reference to the sculpting process, which is relief, and it's done in clay.
I'll say, if you let me interject for a brief moment, Henry,
Sure.
that even so, something to note that before we even started sculpting these, we looked at the molding process and the casting process from the get-go. So these boards that they are sculpting these on are, I mean, if not this one, because this was the smallest casting, but we even thought that there should be 3 inches around the side of the sculpture, but so allow for the sand mold to have enough space, which I'll get more into later. But and I built these boards so that they're as flat as possible. There's a whole 2x4 rib structure underneath them. It's a little bit of overkill, obviously, with just clay. But when it comes to putting hundreds of pounds of sand on them, the hope was to keep it as flat as possible for the final casting. So,
And that it paid off, Zach, because our castings are coming out without any warpage.
Yeah. So I do want to ask, Bill, we see you working here and putting clay on top of a drawing. And what is the
usually
on top?
In this process, I start blocking. It's basically blocking the sculpture. And so before I put any details in, what I'm concentrating on is, and then you see an overlay, which I drew, right? Like there's a clear plastic sheet that's kind of rolled up. On that, I have the drawing again. So I'm laying in the clay according to the contour, the outer contour of the whole sculpture. And then kind of in my mind thinking what the planes are going to be, what the height, depths need to be to make this thing work. Then as it comes along, I take that sheet of clear plastic to check my lines, because of course the drawing lines are gone after the clay's put on, and then I go back in and start working on the details. And what I do is, here is Henry is on this one, I worked on to about 90% done. And then I have Henry, because he's the main designer of this piece. I have him come in to make sure that it's according to what he wants in his vision, and anything that needs to be addressed as something that needs to be changed, or he wants to add some kind of other details, he can go in and do it. And then we both discuss at the end if we think it works or it doesn't.
Yeah, this is a pretty unique thing going on between Bill and I. It's a collaboration in terms of the sculpture. Bill is an incredible sculptor. He's worked in many medias, and he can like most kind of commercial sculptors, we can work in many different kind of styles. And what's just unique about this experience is that the ability for the both of us to work together and to pull this sculpture off, because it would be really time consuming for one person to do all of this work. So this is almost, and I look at it this way, Bill brought reference to how when he casts metal, he thinks of the history and the cultures that developed the whole process. This for me is almost Renaissance like a Renaissance workshop, which projects were done by multiple hands, and it did work. So I think Bill and I are very unique in that way that we can work together and come up with a product that is that solves a problem, and a very Renaissance way of approaching a piece of artwork. Today most artists would have a real difficult time having somebody else touch their work or do this or revise. But in this case, we really are. I think we're working really well as a team on this one, and it's been a great experience for me, and Bill's great to work with.
The one thing, Henry, is I think is me and you have quite a few years behind us on this stuff, and I think that the biggest thing is we've left our egos behind and concentrate on what the job is. And I'm perfectly happy the way things are working together. Me and you get along great for this.
Yeah.
I think it could be a disaster with other people, but me and you have a way of working together that works.
And
Yeah,
I think go ahead.
If I can jump in here really quick, I've seen these guys work, and they are a team. I mean, with Zach, Bill, and Henry, like when Bill talks about the lack of ego, it's really wonderful to see these guys that have such talent and years of experience take advice from each other, and it goes back and forth. And they really the piece and the art is the important thing, and that's very, very clear. And you'll see that when this whole thing is done as well.
And what you're looking at here, this slide here, is once we get the clay done, we would like to have a backup mold of the master in case something happens in the casting process. And I'll let Zach talk about this. And this is just a simple plaster mold, which we could pull either a wax master for casting in the future, or we could redo a clay either way. So Zach, why don't you talk about why we want to do that?
Something we didn't know or weren't 100% confident on is when we sculpted the clay masters, the originals, if how well a mold would pull right off of those. It was my assumption, I think all of our assumption, really, you always think worst case scenario that if you pull a mold off of that, the clay is want to come with the mold and basically destroy the original, which if I were to say take a sand mold, which I'll get more into what a sand mold is in a minute, but if I were to take a sand mold off of that and it pulls and we destroy the original, then all we had, these foundry molds are one-time goes, so if something were to happen and we didn't have the original and we didn't have a good bronze casting, we would have to resculpt the whole thing. So by making this plaster, it's our fail-safe, really. So unfortunately, Henry is so knowledgeable about the way he takes molds that the way he took that plaster mold off, it was basically flawless, and it has been the other casting that we have now too. So it's looking pretty good for the project. So we were able to basically just reuse the originals without spending our time making another wax positive for us to take a foundry mold off of. So it just saved us a little bit of time, and it's a fail safe. And now we have a plaster molds, which, if you ever want to recast one of these in the future, something we could quite easily. So here there's a wooden flask around the clay pattern getting prepped for making a sand mold. I suppose I'll just get into what that is. So a sand mold, sand has a high heat refractory properties, so it'll hold its shape under high heat. Which works well for hot metal castings. There's the sand. When I say a sand mold, we mix a fine grained sand with a resin and a catalyst, which makes it set up like rock hard. So basically, yes, exactly in that picture, I can take a mold off of something, pop it up, right? And I can make parts like you would with a plaster mold. Basically, they're just, they're very heavy, and you have to do some pre-planning for them. But that is generally how you go about casting plaques and very thin things. But it's a really interesting process because there's a lot of fancy things you can do, and you can see right there, it gets very, very good detail. I mean, you can get fingerprint detail out of sand, depending on the grain of the sand. So right there, I am burning in a mold wash. So this is designed for silicon bronze casting mold wash that we purchase. The idea is that you brush it into wherever the surfaces are that the bronze will be cast, so that the bronze doesn't have the opportunity to actually be so hot that it burns into the sand and ruins some of your surface detail. So this, it's mixed with some alcohol, and you brush or spray or apply it to the surface, and then you burn it in, which makes it kind of settle into the surface. So basically, when we're casting, it's a refractory, it's a safety for the surface.
Zach, is that a satisfying part of the process? It seems to me like just it's either satisfying or completely just scary.
I'll say it's one of the fun parts,
Yeah.
You actually don't have to burn it at all.
You just like it.
You don't, yeah, really, you just like it. So it's always like whenever I've been doing these, I do a lot of iron casting, and it's a big community event. So there's always a lot of sculptors around, and we're always like, oh, we're gonna burn in the surface. So everybody like comes over and watches the fire for a second. It burns very quickly because it's all just alcohol. There's no like fuel for it. So yeah, but it's fun. Yeah. But you actually don't have to burn it in, but we always do. And this was the you can see again, it pulled right off perfectly. So, and that's a nice big mold. In this picture here, I have been getting the two parts together. So, okay, so you can see in the bottom left all of these sort of indents in the mold, and those are what are called keys, registration keys. So when you put the two parts together, they line up perfectly. In the part of the mold that is being held up with the green strap, you can see all these sort of like spider-like little tendrils going on, and those, especially where the holes are, that's actually where the metal is going to enter into the mold and fill in everywhere. So the way that this mold is made is that when I had the part of the mold that's on the ground, I laid in a thin layer of clay over the whole surface, that I wanted the thickness of the metal to be before I cast the second half of the mold. So then when I take the two parts of the molds apart, I take that clay away, and there's a cavity there that will be where the metal will flow. So that combined with those like tendril-like things that are going through there are sort of an organic way for the metal to flow properly throughout the casting.
All right, well, let's get to the...
I just want to add one thing. Here is Zach. Zach is the youngest of our group, but as far as sand molds, he's the guy to go to. This man knows what he's doing with sand.
I like my sand molds.
He's a sand man. We call him a sand man.
We get the sand right down the street. I mean, you drive by on the 190, which is like...
Yes. So we are very fortunate that we have a large sand distributor here in the city of Buffalo. I know people from Pittsburgh and people from close to New York City that actually drive all the way out here to get sand from them. And they're very fortunate, and they donate sand to us. We just have to go pick it up. And it is a good, fine-grained foundry sand, and it is kiln dried. So they are fantastic people. So right here, we are preparing to, we are almost at temp. We cast at 2150. This is what I'm holding on to there is called a pyrometer. It's basically a really high heat thermometer. And now we are gearing up for safety.
Yeah. Why do you guys use leather as compared to like anything synthetic?
So leather will not burn. It will kind of, if metal were to hit us, it will just kind of flow right off. It won't stay anywhere. It'll just kind of drizzle right off. So the way, and you can see Bill, the way he has his apron is underneath there. Everything's set up to just flow right off of you in a worst case scenario.
Yeah. All right. And so, yeah, what's going on here? Is that the furnace or the kiln? And what's the difference?
Bill, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, before we even get going to this part, Zach usually is the control person of the pour, and we each have particular jobs, and you might want to explain that.
Okay.
more.
Yeah. So this is a furnace. Bill's right, but we'll get into that in just a second. So this is a furnace, as opposed to a kiln. A furnace is meant to get a pot of metal up to casting temperature, and a kiln is actually something that's generally meant to stay at a certain temperature for, like, if you had ceramics, and there's certain temperatures where it actually undergoes a chemical change due to heat. So you enter in from like a clay-like property to more stone. So that's kind of the differences there. A furnace is really just as much heat as we can, as quickly as we can. This furnace is heated through just forced air and natural gas. It comes in at an angle, kind of spins around. That's why it's in a circle. Here we are taking out the pot of metal. This is a number 70 pot. This is a very big, hot pot of metal. It's 70 pound. It's called a number 70 because that is 70 pounds of aluminum, but it is 210 pounds of bronze. Yeah, and we all, during this situation, we all have our own, our very unique and important jobs. And we've all kind of fallen into them, and I think we have a really good a working sort of behaviors now. We've kind of learned this. Henry is generally the skimmer, and he controls the crane. And right now, Henry is doing what's called skimming. So if there's any impurities in the metal, which there always are, just any grime, anything that could float under the surface of what we melt, it floats to the top. And Henry is just going in and pushing it away from the pouring spout and just getting out all that stuff so it does not enter into a casting, so that the casting does not have any voids in it, and it's just pure silicon bronze. Another thing that's going on here is there are two ends. So the contraption that is holding the pot of metal is called the shank, and there you can see there's an end with sort of a fork. That's called the live end, that controls how much we're pouring, how fast. That's generally been my job. While Bill is on what we call the dead end, he really just stabilizes everything as I'm going through and moving the jib crane around for us.
So this is where I'll add in one of my favorite quotes: "The suspense is terrible. I hope it lasts." So we're about to pour this in, but my question is, how much time do you have between the furnace and pouring this to make it effective?
So there's a lot of variables there, and my answer is not a lot of time. Pour it as fast as you can, right? With safety being a factor. So we move quickly. We plan, what we don't see right here is we've planned all of this out beforehand, exactly how we're going to move. We do a dry run before we do everything. Now we're pouring this thing, and you'll notice, so right there, what I'm pouring into, we call the cup, and there's a whole bunch of cups on here just in case we didn't get anything poured properly. But you can see how it rose through all the other cups. So that's exactly what you want to have happen. When I poured that, you pour molds, you always pour them as fast as you possibly can in order to have as much pressure pushing through a long, thin pattern like that to cover the whole thing. And so here we're just pouring off excess metal that was in the pot. Generally, I had averaged out that this was going to be about a half a pot of a number 70, this casting. But when you melts metal into a pot, which is actually referred to as a crucible, you fill it all the way. It's sort of another safety thing, is that you don't want to have all that heat from the metal on half of a pot. You want to have it on the whole thing to avoid any crackage or damage on a crucible.
And what's the time between that pour and this moment right here?
Oh, what do we wait? Like an hour or so?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, generally, It depends. I've heard people say you shouldn't wait the same day. You should wait the next day. I generally think the metal actually solidifies very quickly, depending on the thickness of your casting. But in this one, it's pretty quick because it's such a thin thing. But yeah, I am fine with opening it in an hour as long as you're not banging it around or doing anything really crazy with it, because if it's still really hot metal, it'll be a little bit more malleable and prone to breakage. So, and this is
Do you
trying.
always crack your sculptures? And you just
I don't want to talk about how many sculptures I've cracked.
I was actually talking about your hammering technique here.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that like
Well,
that's a normal thing, right?
yes. So obviously, the sand mold is a one-time. It's a one-time mold. You nothing can really stand up to those temperatures and be repeated for too long. I mean,
Look
there
how
are some.
fast they work. It's just
Yeah,
amazing.
we're very efficient. And this is a particularly hard sand mold. I kind of supercharge it to make it a little harder for us with the chemicals. And this, what I'm lifting away there, I always put in, especially for a long, thin mold like this, an interior structure. Just to, I mean, I put handles on there, so it's easier to move it around. But also, if anything were to happen, like the mold falls over, which I can't tell you the number of times things like that have happened to me, it actually won't break, or it'll crack, but it'll be fine. So,
Look at that.
I mean, there is our casting.
So as you're looking at this, when do you know if it's a good casting or not? I mean, do you know at this point?
Well, so there's varying levels to that. Obviously, right off the bat, you can say, "Hey, we have the whole casting, right? Success." And the rest of it from there really becomes how much you can work with. So, and you don't really know that until you have it all wire brushed down and generally sandblasted. Then you can show up any imperfections that might be. There's imperfections in every single casting, so that becomes a thing of that's the real, in my opinion, the beauty of bronze casting is knowing how to fix imperfections, because there's always imperfections.
Yeah, so far we've been pretty good with these. There's a few little grind offs maybe on this one here, but visually speaking, where it's going to sit on the building and everything, it's not even, we're not even worried about it. So,
One thing you do get an appreciation for when you experience casting bronze and bringing a piece to from the master to the bronze itself. And when you do go out and you look at bronzes that have been done in the past and by different or different studios and artists, and you look at a really beautiful piece of bronze, you just marvel at the technical, not only the artistic present what's there in terms of the aesthetic, but I always look at bronzes now and I go look marvel at the technical ability that these people had. I was in London, and these are like twice life-size figures and groupings of figures, and the castings are just unbelievable. And the thing, they casted these things 150, 200 years ago is amazing that they could achieve that kind of expertise and quality.
Well, I think that's something that really hits me when I see all of this, is that this is definitely going to outlast all of us. I mean, it's you see these sculptures that have been around for years and years and years, and the fact that in 200 years, hopefully this thing still exists. There are going to be people looking at this story that you guys have created, and that's not a small thing.
well, and then the oldest sculptures, the old sculptures that say the Greeks and Romans made, they didn't have the advantage of what we have today. Is we have welding. Back then, you wanted to make a 10-foot piece, you used what they call as a Roman joint, and each piece is joined together, and they either pounded it or they put pins through the metal, kind of like rivets, and then work them out. They had no technique to actually join them with a solid joint.
And they also didn't have safety goggles or
Right.
ear protection or anything. So I don't think
Or
people,
cranes.
you
Or
know,
full
the
power
life
cranes.
expectancy back then was quite shorter.
Yeah. So this is the piece just really brushed over. It's not sandblasted yet, right?
Yes.
Right. So, and you can see everyone that there was two pieces here. I don't know how many more. Like you have to do about 5 pieces. I know there's a big one coming up with DeWitt Clinton. He's approximately 4 feet tall or something like that, right?
Yeah, a little over.
Yeah.
And then
So, and then all of this has to be welded together. It's going to be, in different depths and gauges, and then that will then be mounted on the long shed. We're talking with HHL and ECHDC about the best way and the safest way, obviously, to do this. It's going to be well lit, and that is something that we're going to be. This whole sculpture we're going to be unveiling, and we're planning on doing sort of a first look event on October 10th at the Long Shed, if everything keeps on going the way it's been going, which is a positive thing. We're going to be unveiling that, so we hope that you all can join. And then after that, we're going to be doing a public opening of the Long Shed as well. So these are the guys. Thank you, guys, for.
Sorry, guys.
This
Such
is
a
wonderful.
weird picture.
Hey, come on! This is you just poured history. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't expect a lot, right? All right. Well, there you go. And then that is the end of our presentation in terms of just what we have to say. But we'd like to hear from you right now. I don't know if you have any chats. Let's see. Oh, you have audio but no video. Any advice? I'm sorry, Margaret. We can talk about that. Hopefully that'll work. But does anybody have any questions that we can add to this to give these guys? I'll just wait for a minute and see if there's any chat that jumps in here. Any questions?
I have a question,
Sure, go ahead.
Olga. I would love to have a video of this so I can send my family and so that they can see what a wonderful thing you all are doing here.
Well, okay, that's wonderful to hear. And yes, we are going to be taking this and putting this on YouTube. It'll be on our website. So, and we'll be. Are you? Hopefully, you're on our emails that we sent.
Yes, I'm a member. Yes.
We'll be putting that onto a YouTube clip, and we would love for you to share it far and wide and let people know the good work we're doing.
I will. Thank you.
You bet. I will say that there's a question of, is the building at Canal Side now open for public visits yet? No, it's not going to be open until probably late October for public visits if things go according to plan and we don't relapse into another wave of this stuff. But once that is, it's going to be open from approximately 9 to 5 or something, or depending on when we're there, that people can just wander in and see people working on the boat. And then, do you still use the workshop facility over in Black Rock? Yes, of course. Please visit us. And speaking of which, 90 Arthur Street in Riverside is our facility. We're planning to be opening in phase 4, which is, I believe, June 30th. We're not going to be officially open until the week afterward, so please keep in touch. But once that happens, we encourage you to stop by. We ask you to bring a mask, because we all want to be safe and take care of the CDC guidelines and things like that.
I should let them know if you want to see some of the sculpting going on. I'm usually here in the evening at around 5 till later, and we're doing the work. I'm doing the work here. Henry's at home, and sometimes Zach is here when he's in the middle of making sand mold. So you can drop by and see some of this process going on.
Yeah, I think, and especially once we open, I think we're going to have a lot more people kind of coming through. I do have another question here. What kind of clay do you use? Plasticine, oil-based?
Plasticine.
So
Yeah.
the clay we use, yes, is oil-based. And we don't use wet clays for a lot of different reasons. They're just harder for us to work with. And, a lot of the materials, the foundry materials we work with are water sensitive. So so that we would run into problems there. But I will say, even before we choose which plasticine to use, we think about the molding process and the actual modeling process. And we ordered for this project a specific clay that has a specific hardness to it. So, you know, we are pretty specific in the materials we use. But yes, we do use plasticine in oil-based clay.
And in general to it, there are two kinds of plasticine. There's sulfur and non-sulfur. And for many years, I've switched from sulfur to non-sulfur clay. And one of the reasons that I use, and many artists use non-sulfur clay, is that sulfur will inhibit some of rubbers for making molds. If you want to make a rubber mold, especially urethane rubber mold, sulfur will inhibit that and the mold won't set. So to avoid that kind of nightmare where you can ruin your sculpture, generally I have a tendency, and many artists have a tendency to use a non-sulfur clay. Plus you can develop an allergic reaction to sulfur as well. So
Yeah, the sulfur gets absorbed through your skin, and then you get swelling in your hands too. So
It smells
you're looking-
rather, I think.
Yeah.
So, and so we have a couple more comments here. Look forward to the Chip says, look forward to the center being open again, as do we, believe me. And then thank you for your Zoom presentation, was great. And Matt Meyer, who is on with HHL Architects, he designed the building. So thank you for joining, Matt, and we really appreciate your work and your partnership throughout this whole thing. So any other questions before we kind of cap off everything? I will say that if you see here, this foundry at buffalomaritimeCenter.org, if you have any questions for these guys that you want to follow up with, you know, or you want to come in to see what's going on once we open back up, by all means, drop a line and we'll go from there. So there's that. And I'll just go to the last slide, which is, so please visit our website, go to Facebook, follow us on Facebook, Instagram. We put updates on there all the time. Please sign up for our newsletter that we send out pretty much every weekly or every other week about everything that's going on, or give a call at the number that you see there. If it's a general inquiry, info at Buffalo Maritime Center. But and if you like what you see here, we ask you to support this and all of our other programs at the BMC, the Packet Boat, the Hand-to-Hand Student Boat Building Program. Please visit our website and make a donation if you're able to. We want to keep this going, and we need your help to do that. So we greatly appreciate all of your time. Thank you, Zach, Henry, and Bill. Any last parting words for these guys?
well, thank everybody for your support.
Yeah, thanks for
And,
coming, everybody.
Yep. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, well, you all take care and enjoy this now beautiful day. I'm glad that it changed around. And we'll hopefully we'll have more of these in person. But if you did appreciate this and you liked what you've seen, we ask you to drop us a line. Let us know your thoughts, what can be improved and what we can change. So thank you all for your help, and we'll talk with you soon. Okay, take care.